Um, so, more generally, I've been asked many times how to reprogram a TDS sufferer. I'm going to give you uh, kind of a quick take on the general way to do it. Now, I'm not convinced this will work yet because I haven't done this exact thing with anybody yet, but I feel like it's the only path that could work. And it goes like this. The first thing you need to do is change the frame. So you got to reframe it. The frame that most people are in, and it makes sense that they would be in it, is that they're trying to decide, is Trump good or is he evil? Is Trump good or evil? And then if you have TDS, you say Trump is evil. And then if you try to argue it against it, what happens? Oh, but what about the other thing? And then you debunk it. But what about the other thing? You debunk it. What about the other thing? And you debunk it. That never works because they'll eventually run out of time and they'll be sure that there were three other things that you didn't debunk that are totally relevant. But you could have. You just you didn't have enough time to do all three. So, or they will say that you're lying or incorrect, or CNN said something else. So you can't really talk somebody into it directly if you're in the frame of, is Trump good or is he evil? And evil usually means racist dictator. But here's what you can do, I think. Instead of the frame, Trump is good or bad, get completely out of that and start working on the frame, is the news real or not real? Now, when I say is the news real, I don't mean the sports news or the finance news or the weather. I think those are usually real. And if they're not real, at least they tried to make them real. But when it comes to the important stuff like geopolitical stuff and politics, I don't think any of it's real. I don't think the science is real. I don't think most of the finance is real. So when you say that the news isn't real and never has been, you're really going to have to sell that. If you can sell them on the fact that news is not real, then they can find the answer themselves. But let me just go through this a little bit more. So here's how I'd approach it. Blah blah blah. Trump is evil. Trump is evil. And then you say, it's really hard to have a conversation about whether Trump is evil or good if we have a different opinion of whether the news is real or not real. See, that's the reframe. So you try to keep them there. They'll try to escape, but try to keep them there. And then here's your explanation. I heard somebody say that Adams guy saying that there's no way that any government, whether it's a dictatorship or any of the democracies, there's no way any of them can allow the news to be completely uncontrolled. And the reason is every single country has the same requirement. They need to get the citizens on their side and not to be questioning too much what the government's saying about the important stuff. If the government wants to start a war or increase taxes or do something, the government will require that the main brainwashing mechanism to get people on board, which is the news, they'll require control over it. There probably is no exception, and maybe never will be, to the fact that intelligence groups will eventually come to control every government. And that's because they have the tools to do it. And if they don't do it on day one, eventually you'll get a leader in that role in the intelligence community who will say, we should probably have some conversations with CNN, maybe make some links. And then you start making suggestions to CNN. It would be much better if you said this instead of that. And in a variety of ways, you can bribe or work with or persuade. And eventually, the news is saying what you want, and they're even checking with you before they report stuff. So I would say it's well demonstrated that our CIA, for many decades in the United States, was tasked with controlling the media, and they did. Now, this is well documented. So if you can't sell that, you have to stop. You have to sell them first that it is universally true, it's in every country all the time, and that it's documented. Now, they won't ask for any documentation that Russia and China have fake news. because they'll believe that. You're going to have to convince them that in the United States it's always been fake. Again, not the sports and the weather and the natural disasters, but the geopolitical stuff, the stuff that the intelligence people would care about. Because it's the difference between their ops working and not working. And of course, they want them to work. So if you can sell that, then you can go to the next stuff. And you could say, what about those every time there's 99 experts on the same side? If somebody still believes that 99 experts on the same side means something, they probably didn't go through the pandemic. But if they did, just remind them that all those experts have a boss. Bosses, let's say it's a hospital, if you're a doctor or some bigger entity, the larger entity is kind of forced to do the standard things. So if you were to disagree with the standard things, probably there's an insurance risk problem, but there's definitely a boss problem. So the boss will tell the expert no. Or the expert needs to get some funding. Are they going to get some funding to prove that climate change doesn't exist? No. So if you follow the money pretty much guarantees that the 99% or the 98% is, first of all, not even true. But secondly, it wouldn't mean anything. It has no predictive value. I would also talk about Gell-Mann theory, that if you're an expert in a field, you can tell that your field is fake, but you think the other stuff might be real because you don't know. So if you can get somebody to understand that the CIA has always controlled the news and always should and always needs to, and it can never change, and you might not even want it to, because I don't think a country can survive if the news is completely uncontrolled. I hate to say it, I prefer that it be uncontrolled, but I don't know that we could survive it. And you also need to keep away from getting into the Trump detail as you're doing this and just say it really doesn't help to debate with somebody who doesn't have a background in understanding that the news is not just sometimes wrong, it's necessarily, by design, it has to be wrong. And it's easy to demonstrate because every expert in every domain will tell you that the stuff in their domain is wrong. And anybody who's a public figure will tell you that the reporting on them is all wrong. Spend 5 minutes with me on the internet, and I'll show you that everything I'm criticized for wasn't true. It's not that I have a reason for what I did, it's that the criticisms are 100% not true. Everything that people accuse me of today, not true, didn't happen. Right? Now, every public figure will have that same story, that most of the things about them are out of context or something missing, not true. So if you can get people to believe that all celebrities know their news is not true, all experts know that their news is not true, and then here's the kill shot. Everybody in the intelligence community knows the news isn't true. So those are the three I'd ask, right? Then, so you're working on sort of a common sense argument that there's no way the news could be real. And if some of it was real, you wouldn't know the difference because it would be mixed in with so much that isn't, you couldn't tell. And then if you can establish that news and whether the news is real is the big question, and if you can even get them to accept that that's the important question, because what I think is that Trump supporters, the TDS people, believe that the Trump people are evil and that they're fully aware of all the evil that Trump does according to them, right? But if you can get them to just accept the frame that what you should be talking about is whether news in general is real. And by the way, don't make the mistake of saying, it's a good thing I get the real news on Fox News. That's the end of the conversation. Don't do that. Do not say there's some real news and you watch it. Don't say that. You lose as soon as you say, well, the news I watch is real. You should watch some real stuff. Oh, you have no chance. And by the way, if you say that even once, you'll never, ever persuade anybody on this topic. That's the end of your credibility. You have to be consistent and say that the news, all the news on the important stuff is being influenced. Then, if you can get them to believe that it's a world in which the news is maybe not real, they're sort of on the fence, but they're not going so far, that's when you break out the hoax list and you say, if I'm right that the news is always fake, then I should be able to give you lots of examples of fake news that are clearly debunked. Would you agree? My theory that it's always fake should produce a whole bunch of examples, and then people will say, yeah, I mean, if unless you're making this up, there must be a lot of examples of this so-called fake news. And that's when you pull out the list of 50 fake stories. You can find it on the internet. Just look for a hoax list. It'll pop up. Some of them are 12, some of them are 50, but any of them work. Once and then once you have the list, you know what happens next, right? With the TDS sufferer, well, nothing on that list is true. Those are not hoaxes. Those are all real. That's when you go to the Find People hoax and say, let me just pick one. And you see if you can make the Find People hoax debunked and stick. Tell them that Snopes debunked it. Tell them that Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, I think Bill Ackman, a number of the most famous people have turned toward Trump specifically because they found out that was fake. And then here's the key. If they still don't believe it, or they think maybe this one's right, but all the other ones are true, then aim them at the website AmericanDebunk.com. American with an N at the end of American, AmericanDebunk.com. It's a very good list, very readable, with the examples of how the hoaxes were created, because it's not enough to say they're not true. You have to show the mechanism by which they were created and spread. Once you see the mechanism, then you can see that a lot of them are created the same way. And then you say, but when you hear that Trump's a racist, it's hard to explain why Michael Jackson lived in his building and they were good buddies. Mike Tyson loves him to death for all the help he's given him. Larry Elder says he's terrific. Byron Donaldson wants to help him as much as he can. Do you think that the people who knew him best think he's a racist? And the answer is nobody. We have not produced anybody who knows him personally who thinks he's a racist. That's got to mean something. Because if you think that Michael Jackson didn't know what racism looked like, or that Mike Tyson couldn't identify racism in the wild, or that Larry Elder or Byron Donaldson would just not notice or somehow overlook it, no. No, yeah, and also McGuire, I think the Find People hoax flipped him as well. Anyway, and then your final end of your persuasion is to note that if anything they had said about Trump was true, why are they so happy about the peaceful transfer of power? Why did they chat and laugh with him at Carter's funeral? And then you walk away. Don't wait for somebody to be convinced. That doesn't happen while you're talking to them. That has to sink in. They got to do a little research on their own. Sometimes they can get there. But the key point I can't stress enough is you got to take them out of the frame of Trump good versus bad and into the frame news is true versus news is not. That's the only opening you have.